Welcome to NFL News Today, bringing you the latest updates, hottest analysis, and all the action from the NFL, right here. From breaking news to team performances and legendary player highlights, we've got it all. If you're a true NFL fan, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to share with your friends. Stay updated. Stay ahead. This is NFL News Today. What's going on, Raider Nation? We've got a lot of big NFL news to talk about today, some involving the Raiders, some not, but all of it could have an impact on the team. And I have plenty of thoughts to share. One of the biggest stories right now comes from a well-respected Raiders insider, Vincent Bonsignore. When the Raiders want to get a message out, he's often the guy they go to. And now, he's reporting that the team is actively shopping tight end Michael Mayer. According to multiple sources, several teams have been doing their research on Mayer, and the Raiders are open to making a deal. This rumor first surfaced last week, but now that Bonsignore is confirming it, there's a good chance it's true. So what does this mean? It tells me that new general manager Tom Telesco has evaluated the roster, talked to head coach Chip Kelly, and together they've decided that Mayer might have more value to another team than he does to the Raiders. It also suggests that Kelly's offensive system may not rely on having two tight ends. Instead, it looks like Brock Bowers will be the primary tight end, while the offense shifts to using more wide receivers, maybe even going 3, 4, or 5 wide in certain situations. When the previous regime, led by Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler, traded up to draft Mayer, they believed they had landed one of the best tight ends in that class. But things haven't worked out as expected. Mayer struggled in his rookie season, and while he showed some improvement in his second year, injuries kept him off the field for the first half of the season. He never quite became the dominant player many thought he would be when he was tearing it up at Notre Dame. Even in his final college season, his performance dipped, and that inconsistency has carried over into the NFL. Now the Raiders are exploring trade options, possibly looking to get a draft pick in return. It's a big decision that could shape the future of the team, and we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. I have to be honest. I'm not sure if any team is going to offer much for Michael Mayer. His trade value just isn't that high right now. He was drafted early in the second round, but at this point, the best-case scenario might be getting a fourth-round pick in return. The problem? His tape hasn't been impressive, his production has been underwhelming, and he struggles to create separation. Other teams are going to see that too. If a team really needs a tight end, they have a choice to make. Trade a fourth-round pick for Mayer, or just wait for the upcoming draft and select a young tight end with a fresh 4-year rookie contract. A guy like Harold Fannin Jr. from Bowling Green could be an option in the later rounds. This year's draft class is deep at multiple positions: tight ends, defensive ends, offensive linemen. So teams might prefer drafting someone new instead of trading for Mayer, who only has 2 years left on his rookie deal before needing a bigger contract. At this point, there's a good chance Mayer won't be on the Raiders roster much longer. But there's also a scenario where no team offers a pick, and the Raiders decide to keep him. Personally, I wouldn't mind seeing him stay. Even though he hasn't lived up to expectations, he could still develop into a solid player. Will he ever be worth the early second-round pick the Raiders used on him? Probably not, but he's shown some value as a run blocker, and if he improves in pass protection, he could still have a role, maybe playing 15 snaps a game in certain situations. The real question is whether he's willing to accept that kind of limited role. Another factor is Chip Kelly's offensive system. He's expected to use more 5-man pass protection, which means the offense won't rely much on tight ends for blocking. That could be another reason the Raiders are willing to move on from Mayer. Beyond the Mayer situation, there's a lot happening around the league. Free agency is just around the corner, and teams are getting ready to make big moves. Trades, rumors, and reports are coming in fast, and we're starting to see some major decisions being made. Earlier today, the Cincinnati Bengals placed the franchise tag on T. Higgins for the second straight year. He's now set to make $26 million this season. This move could mean the Bengals are planning to keep him for one more year, but it could also be a setup for a trade. We'll have to see how that situation unfolds. The idea of trading a player like T. Higgins is definitely on the table. It's not a matter of if, but when it might happen. Whether it's next week or sometime within the year, you can expect a team in need of a top-tier wide receiver to swoop in for him. But here's the thing. T. Higgins is no ordinary player, and letting him walk freely to another team just isn't an option. This is a wide receiver who brings the complete package. He's not just fast or elusive. He's a physical powerhouse, capable of dominating any defensive coverage. Whether it's breaking through double coverage or powering through press coverage, Higgins excels. And when you put a single defender on him, it's almost a guaranteed win for him. There's no question he's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL today. Now, as for his value, it's clear that Higgins is set to earn upwards of $30 million. And it's no surprise that some fans have been hoping for the Raiders to make a move for him. The Raiders are in need of that kind of wide receiver. But let's not forget, there are also exciting options in this year's draft. For example, Marvin Harrison Jr. was a standout last year and remains a top-tier choice. This year, there are other strong contenders too. Tetro McMillan, for example, has the potential to be a real standout as a top-tier wideout. There's even a player from Colorado who could fit that same mold, though his name slips my mind at the moment. But the point is, finding a true X-wide receiver is rare and not as easy as picking up a guy who can shift around in motion or be the second option. In this current setup, the Raiders have Jakobi Meyers filling that wide receiver 2 role, which adds another interesting layer to the team's dynamics. But back to Higgins, while he's been franchise tagged by the Bengals, I still think there's a chance he could be traded. From a Raiders perspective, unless the price is extremely low, it's not worth the investment. Paying him $30 million or more just doesn't seem practical, especially when you factor in the trade price. Moving to another point of focus, there's been a lot of chatter surrounding the Bengals' release of guard Alex Kappa. And while some people seem to be treating Kappa's release like it's a major event, I don't think it's as big a deal as people are making it. Kappa's been a solid player in the past, no doubt. He had a successful run with the Buccaneers, then spent the last few years with the Bengals. But after a drop in performance last season, giving up a handful of sacks, it's understandable that the Raiders aren't keen on paying Kappa $56 million for a guy who might not bring a lot of upside to the team. He's not a game changer, and when you think about it, he's more of a guy who holds his ground than someone who moves people off the line. This kind of decision makes you think about teams like the Panthers, who, as I pointed out in previous game previews, have one of the best offensive lines in the league. They're real bullies up front, and that's the kind of powerhouse offensive line every team is striving for. When the Panthers played the Raiders, they absolutely dominated, leaving us in the dust. They came out strong and didn't hold back, running all over us and putting up one of those performances where we simply couldn't generate any pressure on their offensive line. And the reason for that was clear. The Panthers had built an offensive line full of bullies. Guys like Ika Mekwonu at left tackle, Damian Lewis at left guard, and Robert Hunt at right guard. They weren't just blocking, they were bullying. These guys physically dominated, and they did it to a lot of teams last season. Alex Kappa, however, isn't a bully. If you look at the Raiders line, whether it's Kappa, Jordan Meredith, or Dylan Parham, these guys aren't pushing people around. They're solid, but they're not the kind of physical presence you need to establish control up front. For the Raiders, it's crucial to bring in those types of players who can impose their will on the opposition. Jackson Paris-Johnson is a great start, but I'm not sure DJ Glaze is the long-term answer at right tackle. I would give him another year to prove himself, but he's not a bully either. To truly beef up the line, the Raiders need to find someone who can bring that physicality to the guard position. And lucky for them, this draft class is full of players who could fill that role. Guys like Anthony Ballon and Charles Grant stand out to me. Both of them can play guard or tackle, though I'd start them at tackle first. But bringing in guys like that, players who can move people and create gaps, that's exactly what the Raiders need to strengthen their offensive line. You can't win with just holders, offensive linemen who can maintain their position but don't have the power to move defenders. Imagine Alex Kappa trying to block Chris Jones. At best, they'd stalemate, Chris Jones holding his ground and Kappa doing the same. In that situation, the running back is left to squeeze through tiny gaps. But if Paris Johnson makes contact with Jones, Jones is getting moved 2 yards back, opening up a clear lane. That's the kind of impact the Raiders need from their offensive line. Some people are still suggesting that Alex Kappa could be a good fit for the Raiders, but I'm not on board with that. The main reason is simple. The draft class has so many strong interior offensive linemen. We're talking about a bunch of guys who are ready to step in and make a difference. Will Campbell might not be a tackle at the next level, and Josh Simmons, while he showed some promise, had disappointing measurements. However, if Simmons doesn't work out at tackle, he could be a solid option at guard. Donovan Jackson played well at left tackle for Ohio State when needed, but his measurements suggest he might be better suited for guard. In fact, I think most of the top 10 tackles in this class will eventually move to guard. That's just how deep this draft is with strong interior offensive linemen. Anthony Ballon, Josh Simmons, and even Josh Connerlew have the potential to stick at tackle, but it's still uncertain. Charles Grant, who plays left tackle for William & Mary, is more likely to transition to guard at the next level. In the end, while the draft may not have a lot of pure tackle prospects, there's an abundance of talent at guard. And if the Raiders can land one of those bullies up front, they'll be setting themselves up for much greater success in the future. There's been a lot of buzz and some weird trends happening from the Senior Bowl to the Combine. It's like everyone's taller at the Combine, but their arm measurements don't quite match up. It's been strange to see, and it's causing a bit of confusion, especially when it comes to the offensive line. My number one offensive tackle, who I've been watching closely, might actually be better suited as a guard at the next level. This could make the draft a bit unpredictable, as teams might end up valuing different players as tackles or guards, depending on their specific needs. So, as we move into the draft, it's going to be one of those years where things get a little murky in terms of positional value. On another note, Darius Slay was released earlier today, and I've seen a lot of Raider fans wondering if the team should make a move for him, especially with our secondary not exactly being flawless last season. I get where people are coming from. Our secondary struggled at times last year, and there were moments where it felt like the defense was the weak link. But let's not forget, we had a lot of key injuries that contributed to those struggles. Malcolm Kuhn was out for the entire year, and he was someone we were counting on. Christian Wilkins, another guy we invested a lot in, played only 5 or 6 games before getting hurt. Then there's Max Crosby, who missed about a third of the season, which is a significant chunk of time. When you add all that up, it's clear our defense was banged up and not at full strength. As for Jack Jones, there's been some criticism, with people questioning whether he's truly a starting caliber cornerback. Personally, I disagree. I believe Patrick Graham had Jack Jones trying to bait quarterbacks and make plays by jumping routes, which can look a bit risky at times, but it's part of the scheme. If you look at the tape, you can see that sometimes Jones was doing his job, and it was the safety or other coverage responsibilities that weren't aligned properly. There were moments where Isaiah Palau seemed a step behind, and other instances where coverage assignments just got confused. It wasn't always on Jones. Sometimes it was the defense as a whole not clicking. Given all this, I don't think the Raiders are in a position where they need to completely overhaul the secondary. Sure, Darius Slay is a solid player, but he's getting up there in age. While I would still consider bringing him in for depth or leadership, I don't think it's a necessity. The Raiders have already brought back Isaiah Palau, and if they re-sign Trayvon Mullen, that puts them in a pretty good spot. With Hobbs' future still up in the air, the Raiders could look at adding another corner or safety in the draft. But overall, the secondary isn't as bad as some people think. Jack Jones has proven he has legit skills. He's made impressive plays on the ball, and that's not something you see every day. Sure, he needs to refine his game and limit some of the big plays he gives up, but I think a lot of that is tied to the defensive scheme. If they allow him to play a little more controlled, he could be a standout corner in the future. If Jack Jones ends up with the Commanders, I think he could thrive in a system that's a better fit for his style. If the Raiders were to part ways with Jack Jones for whatever reason, I truly believe that Dan Quinn could work wonders with him. Under Quinn's guidance, Jones could quickly rise to become one of the top 10 cornerbacks in the NFL. We saw what Quinn did with guys like Donon Bland, a fifth-round pick, and Trayvon Diggs, both of whom became top-tier corners under his system. But we've also seen them struggle a bit now that Quinn's no longer their coach. Cornerbacks are often considered a system position, much like quarterbacks. While some argue Tom Brady was a system quarterback, it's clear that a good system can make a huge difference for a cornerback's success. We see time and again that a good scheme can help players shine, and without it, they can struggle. When we look at the Raiders' current situation, I don't think they're desperate for a player like Darius Slay. Yes, Slay could bring value, but Jack Jones and Nate Hobbs have both been solid contributors, and we've got a few other promising players, including Jacorian Bennett, who was handpicked by Patrick Graham. If we can keep those guys in place and maybe draft someone like Malaki Starks, if he somehow drops into the second round, the Raiders could be in a great position going forward. I'd likely pass on Darius Slay at this point. Another name that came up was Osa Odighizuwa, who we've discussed before. Some people were questioning why the Raiders would pay $20 to $25 million for a guy they hadn't really heard of. But let me tell you, Osa is the real deal. The Dallas Cowboys franchise tagged him, and he's set to earn around $25 million for the upcoming year. With his impressive skill set and potential, I wouldn't be surprised if the Cowboys lock him into a long-term deal worth close to $25 million per year. Osa is a legitimate pass rusher and defensive tackle, and he's only 24 years old, so his best football is definitely ahead of him. Sometimes defensive tackles don't get as much attention as other positions, but Osa deserves recognition for his talent, and I think he's poised for a big future. Lastly, let's talk about Debo Samuel and his recent trade to the Washington Commanders for a fifth-round pick. Should the Raiders have jumped on the chance to bring him in? Debo is a unique player. He's not quite a wide receiver, not quite a running back, but somewhere in between. He's a weapon on offense. Think of him like Percy Harvin, who could do a little bit of everything, or JohnSpytek, who might not have been a traditional wide receiver, but was an explosive force. Samuel's versatility allows him to impact the game in multiple ways, but to maximize his potential, you need a creative offensive coordinator who can design plays that take advantage of his skill set. While Debo's move to the Commanders is interesting, the Raiders may not need to make that big of a play for him right now, especially with other areas of the team to focus on. Debo Samuel is a talented player when he's fully healthy, which hasn't always been the case over the last couple of years. If he's in top shape, he's absolutely a good football player, and I understand why the Washington Commanders made the trade for him, especially for just a fifth-round pick. However, it's important to recognize that the fifth-round pick isn't the only cost here. The Commanders also have to absorb a $30 million per year contract. So, while it's a relatively cheap trade on paper, the financial commitment is significant. For the Commanders, though, it makes sense. They're trying to push for a Super Bowl run and are making moves to strengthen their roster. Plus, their general manager, Adam Peters, has ties to the 49ers and knows Debo well, so this connection likely played a role in the decision. For the Raiders, though, I don't think this trade would have been the right move, even if it was just a fifth-round pick. Sure, Debo would have made the team better, but I think the Raiders are in a good spot with the receivers they already have. What they really need is a true X receiver, some depth at running back, and a little work on the offensive line. If they can get those pieces right, combined with the right quarterback, they could be set to compete. Small changes in the offseason could make all the difference for the Raiders. Look back just 2 years ago, and many people were saying the Raiders' defense was a huge issue. Fast forward to 2023, and the Raiders made major improvements. After firing Josh McDaniels, the defense became the #1 unit in the NFL. That wasn't just a fluke. The defensive line became a major strength. Going into this past season, we expected a top 5 defensive line, but injuries took their toll. On top of that, the offense struggled with turnovers. The key moving forward for the Raiders is finding a quarterback who can protect the ball, and with that, the team could really see success this season. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit the thumbs up and subscribe if you're not already. I really appreciate all the support. As we get into the slower part of the offseason, we'll likely talk about random NFL news and updates, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.